Blessings, beloveds. Anastasia, Cosmic Astrologer. Welcome back and thank you for tuning in and taking the time to listen. I have something really valuable to share today, and so I thought, well, it's an opportunity to just to demonstrate the power of midpoints. Okay, so midpoints is a fascinating area of astrology. It's often referred to as cosmobiology, and it is quite a specialized field. And I encourage you to learn about it if you haven't actually developed any understanding around the midpoint structures in the charts, because there's a lot of material you will actually retrieve and identify that you otherwise wouldn't. So midpoints is an absolute core as far as I'm concerned relative to understanding astrology in the birth chart. So just very quickly, we had the full moon a couple of days ago, okay, and I ended up doing a video on Ceres ingressing into Gemini. I had quite a bit to say about that. Some of you have listened. Those of you that haven't, you can always tune in and listen. It was the reason I'm mentioning it is because on that particular day, it actually was the full moon in Aquarius, which really highlighted humanity, the people. Full moon in Aquarius. The moon always represents the people. Aquarius is a sign of humanity. So we had this collective protesting take place. Now, I wasn't aware at that particular time that it was a collective protest that was collaborated and synchronized between the entire globe, the entire world, certain communities and people. That is, I thought it was only happening here in Australia, in Sydney and Melbourne. And the protesting was going on as I was actually recording that particular video. And as soon as I finished recording, I did some further inquiring myself and realized that, in fact, it was a global demonstration. Now, why is that important? It's important because at the time of the full moon, well, first of all, the people all united and came together during a full moon in Aquarius. Now, I can bet you that the majority of those people didn't know that it was going to be a full moon in Aquarius necessarily, and therefore collaborate with the entire world. Let's all meet up on the 24th of July and protest, because that's when the moon is going to be full in Aquarius. There might have been a few people that were aware of that, but I dare say that the collaboration was not based on that. And so I'm highlighting that because it's synchronicity, it's not coincidence. And that is the matter that brings up as above, so below, right? We are always in tune with the celestial bodies in one way or another, whether we are conscious of it or not. And that's just a beautiful example of that. So on that particular day, what was happening was transiting Mars. Let me just grab some tools. Now, I've injured my right hand just slightly, so I'm kind of just able to use one hand at the moment, and it's a little bit tricky. So just bear with me while I navigate. So here is transiting Saturn in Aquarius, 10 degrees 42 minutes. And here is transiting Uranus at 14 degrees 32 minutes of Taurus. And up here is transiting Mars at 27 degrees of Leo. First of all, transiting Saturn and transiting Uranus are dancing together all year in a square aspect. And so dancing is perhaps not the right term. It'd be more like boxing, shadow boxing. So anyway, they're in a very significant, stressful, dynamic aspect, which requires crisis, action, conflict, and so forth. And that's really what we're seeing in the world at large, clearly. And of course, transiting Eris, which is just there. She's there, forming, of course, her square to Pluto, which she has been for quite some time. I just bought a book on Eris today. I'm really excited to read it. The individual who's written the book, I've looked at a couple of his articles and I was really, really impressed. And I thought, okay, well, I think his book is going to be a necessary addition to my library. So once I've received it and read it, I'm going to bring some further knowledge and wisdom about Eris in a more personal way for all of us. So that's yet to come. So stay tuned for that. Getting back to this, so here's the significant thing. On the day of the full moon, which is the day that the global protesting took place, which was largely attributed to the full moon in Aquarius and, of course, the Saturn squaring Uranus, transiting Mars in Leo is actually forming what's called an inconjunct midpoint, okay, which is around about here at 27 of Pisces, to Uranus and Saturn. So let me say that again. Transiting Mars at 27 degrees of Leo forms an inconjunct midpoint between Saturn and Uranus. Now, most people will miss this, particularly because it's an inconjunct and your naked eye won't pick it up necessarily very easily unless you've got an incredibly technical trained eye with aspects and degrees and things of that nature. But most people don't necessarily have that, and that's neither here nor there relative to good or bad. It's just a fact, right? So, we rely as upcoming new astrologers. A lot of the new sort of generational astrologers at the moment rely heavily on technology because they have access to it. Whereas back in the day, when I learnt, we didn't have the access to these wonderful tools. Anyway, okay, so here's the thing. I'm going to read to you what it means when you have Mars at the midpoint of Saturn and Uranus. So here it is. It's just a tiny little sentence, and it will tell you exactly what's going on. The midpoint for Saturn and Uranus when it is Mars, an act of violence, the occasionally wrong use of extraordinary energy, undergoing great efforts and toil, a violent or forced release from tensions or strains, the stage of challenging others for a decisive contest or fight, injury, accident, deprivation of freedom. Now, you could not actually articulate a more significant and profound sentence to describe the events of what took place on the 24th of July collectively on the day of the full moon in Aquarius, which was represented by world protests. And the protests were primarily about freedom and sovereignty. A few people came onto my YouTube channel and said, what's the protesting about? Well, it's always good to kind of educate yourself over that first of all, and I'll answer that now just by saying it's about freedom and sovereignty, basically. So there it is, guys. There's a very important midpoint transit occurring between Saturn, Uranus and Mars, which is only active for a few days, which in no uncertain terms describes the events that have taken place, down to the literal manifestation of what happened, because there was acts of violence. Unfortunately, there was pretty heated up conflict between civilians and police members. Okay, and that's unfortunately that's futile, and that doesn't result in anything really productive and good for anybody, actually. So it's not about people getting hurt. That shouldn't really be, in my opinion, that shouldn't be our direction and our course of action. Our protesting and standing in our truth and in our light within us should be from a place of, yes, wanting to express our sovereignty and freedom and liberation, but in a peaceful manner. People like Martin Luther King, who's a profoundly influential figure in our time, in our history, I should say, achieved tremendous things. Whilst there was, a lot of terrible things happened for sure, but he achieved a lot, and the achievements weren't through violence and anger and things of that nature. So we do need to remember that as best we can. So there you have it. There's a very powerful transiting midpoint that's actually still active as we speak, and will be active, in fact. Let's just see how quickly Mars moves. So let's animate this chart. Sorry, I'm using one hand. and a hand I'm not used to, which just kind of makes things a little bit difficult. And there we go. All right, animate. I just want to animate one day at a time. So Mars will be 28 by the 27th of July, still within range. The degree of the quincunx that Mars is making to the midpoint of Saturn-Uranus is 27 of Pisces. So at 28, still within range. 28th of July, it's still within range. 29th on the 29th degree, that's the degree of Regulus. Quite interesting. Regulus, the fixed star, which is fame, but can be fall from grace as well. So anyway, that's another story. Okay, so by the 30th of July, which is Friday, in the southern hemisphere, Mars has ingressed into Virgo, and I will attempt to come back and speak about that, provided I have the time. I will also come back at some stage and talk about midpoints in general, how to identify them, which ones to identify, how to work with them. I mean, that would be an entire course, really. So I'm only going to just bring as some sort of introduction to get people kind of moving in that direction if they haven't heard of midpoints or if you have no understanding about them. They are an incredibly powerful tool to add to your toolbox in astrology if you are serious about understanding astrology. It's often referred to as cosmobiology. Midpoints is a whole school of thought. It basically originated out of Germany quite a few decades ago. Quite a long time ago. The book that I was reading from, which I have mentioned before in previous podcasts, is a book by Reinhold Erberton called The Combination of Stellar Influences. Reinhold Erberton, The Combination of Stellar Influences. If you look that up online, you'll find it. It was actually first written back in 1940, as a matter of fact, or perhaps even before that. So yeah, as I said, quite a few decades ago. It's a German guy. It is very black and white. The way he writes, a lot of people won't like it. A lot of people will just think, no, that's too harsh. That's too black and white. It's too negative, and it is. It in fact is all those things. But the beauty of it is that it nails certain things in ways that you otherwise won't get from other material, and so that's the benefit of having that book. So I will leave it there because it's time for me to have dinner, and I really only wanted to spend a few minutes just to really demonstrate the power of midpoints and how you can very easily not be aware of them and how they can literally describe very specific circumstances, dynamics, and events. So I'll leave it there and I'll see you guys very soon. Sending you all much love and bye for now.